Welcome to the Whiskey with Winners podcast, the show with business titans sharing their stories of the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite glass of whiskey, and listen to the real and raw stories of these industry leaders. Now, here's your host, the man, the myth, the legend, the most interesting marketer, Jacob Fail.
What's up, everybody? It's Jacob Fail, the most interesting marketer, CEO of Root Media Group. And today on the Whiskey with Winners podcast, we have a very special guest. We have my good friend, Damon Burton. He has actually marketed for an NBA team, also for Inc. 5000 companies. He's on the Forbes Council. He's been in Entrepreneur Magazine and tons of different other articles, and have worked with Shark Tank featured businesses. So welcome, Damon, to the Whiskey Winners podcast.
Thanks, Jacob. Looking forward to talking. How do I get a cool title like most interesting marketer?
You just got to buy the domain, bro. I already got it. Too bad. Yeah. So that's how that came about, man, was actually a play on words. I wanted to make my personal brand, kind of a mix between James Bond and the most interesting man in the world. So I just kind of meshed the two. So that's why I got the sporting the logo. I don't know if you
like it. Yeah.
But see, here's the thing, man. You got the coolest beard in the world. Like,
it's a lie. Like if you see it in person, it's just like thin and wiry. Just Zoom makes me look better.
Yeah. You got the filter on there, the whatever it's called, the filter.
Do they have a beard filter?
No, but they do have one that like makes it look like you got on like blush and stuff, and makes you look all perfect and stuff. So I need to turn that one on for me. No, man, I'm happy to have you here. I wanted to talk a little bit about like your backstory and how you got started in this. So I know you're the founder of SEO National, and how that you got started as far as like entrepreneurship in general, and like where you grew up and kind of what your background is. Because in these interviews, I love diving deeper into who the actual CEO is as a person. So just kind of tell us a little bit about, where you grew up, your childhood, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'll kind of bounce around a little bit and kind of touch on what's probably more applicable, and then we can go deeper wherever you want. So yeah, the short answer is I grew up the oldest of 7, and kind of like lower middle class, no crazy sob story or anything, just we didn't have any disposable income or anything like that. And so where I got into entrepreneurship is I kind of always had a feeling I would do, there was high probability that I would do something, right? But I didn't know what that something was. And I think part of what allowed me to find some success is giving myself the freedom, the grace to like not know and to not force myself down a path. And so a lot of times I'll talk to people about dating your careers, like date your jobs. And what I mean by that is whatever, even if it's at the very beginning of your career, that entry level job, or even if you're mid-career, whatever position you're in now, take from it the good. Like there's always some, and I'll give you like a super simple example. My first job was when I was 16. I was a janitor at a junior high. And so from that, 30 years later, I still do, like when I put the garbage bag in my kitchen, I still tie it a certain way, and I poke a little hole in it to let the air out. So like when you throw garbage in, it doesn't puff up. Like take little things that you can learn from that. And it's just like in a real relationship, like maybe you're dating somebody, maybe it's good, but it's not amazing. And so you start to fine tune and go, okay, I like this and I don't like that. And then when you go to the next job or the next relationship, you go, okay, I'm going to avoid that and focus on this. And then you find that thing, and you continually upgrade your job and your career and whatever. You can probably apply this to any part of your life. But so what I did is I gave myself the freedom to just learn from each opportunity and figure out what I liked and didn't like by process of elimination. And so that way, by the time when I found an opportunity that was good, I could marry it. And so that's kind of the short answer. Maybe one more short answer into how I got specifically into internet marketing is I started a car enthusiast website just out of high school. And even before that, back to like when I grew up, we didn't have computers at my home. And so I'd always take advantage of computers at school, even just typing class. I loved typing class because I got access to a computer. And so I learned from that. And then when I got into high school, I mean, this was 20 something years ago. So they didn't have WordPress, they didn't have Dreamweaver, they didn't have all those things. And so they came out with the first HTML class. And so I learned HTML by hand, which is super valuable. And I still use it today because even now using WordPress or enterprise tools, whatever it may be, like those tools only do what you tell them to do. And so they don't know if it's broke or ugly. And so it's nice to be able to go in and manually override those things. And so I took that experience. And then in high school, I had a communications class, and the instructor said, we're going to build, all of you have to build a basic website with this criteria in it. And it would go on the school server. And then I got thinking about how much time I was going to spend on this project, knowing that at the end of the school year, it would just be wiped off the server. Right. And so I thought that's a lot of time to spend to just throw away a project. And I asked the professor if I could buy a domain, build the project on my own domain and keep it. And he said, yeah, as long as we could access it, that's fine. And, do your grades and look at it and critique it. And so I built this car enthusiast website. And then over the years, I kept it, and it started to pick up traction. And so as it gained more followers and more members, I said, how do I make this better? And so that's how I got into design. And then as the traffic continued to grow, I said, how do I monetize this? And that's how I got into marketing. And then kind of fast forward, I took that experience, was the designer on the side for a long time. And probably the most applicable part of that journey for like the new entrepreneurs that are listening is where I made the jump into entrepreneur land, excuse me, was when I had enough, when I was making enough revenue from my side hustle that I could pay my bills. But my day job was taking up 80% of my time. And so where I took the leap of faith was when I said, okay, if I eliminate that income of my day job, can I still pay my house payment, my car, and whatever else, put food on the table? And this is before I had kids. So I was like, this seems like as calculated as a risk as I can take, right? Because the older I get, more responsibilities I'm going to have. Eventually, we're going to have kids. And so I cut out the day job. And, that obviously sucked to lose 50% of that income, but it freed up 80% of my time. And I was able to make that income back. I mean, this was 15, 16 years ago. So if I remember right, I was able to make it back in just about 2 months by being able to commit to what I was doing on the side and now do that as a full-time thing. Fast forward now, I got 33 employees. We do 7 figures. So that's kind of the abbreviated story, and we can go wherever you want from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about a little bit about the car enthusiast website. So what domain did you buy, and is it still live today?
I still have the domain. It was eliterides.com. And I still have all the content, but I've archived it. Like if you go there, it's just a dead site. I still have everything on my server, and every couple of years I'll go turn it on and just go poke around a little bit. But that's when business started to pick up, and I just 2 reasons why I kind of archived that is, 1, primarily business picked up and I just didn't have time for it, and then 2, it was slowly dying anyway because everyone was moving off of message boards and forums over to Facebook. Right. So I just moved that to spend my time elsewhere. And then what was interesting though is when I started the website, the website focused on like modified cars. So your Fast and Furious kind of stuff, like Honda Civics and Turbos. But I launched the site about 6 months to a year before Fast and Furious came out. We had no idea that was going to come out. And so it ended up being pretty cool because the site was growing already. It had a huge following, especially locally where I was at in Utah. And I still have a lot of my best friends now are from that website 20 something years ago. But then when Fast and Furious came out, it expedited the growth. And some of my funnest memories of hanging out with friends are through that car enthusiast website, just getting together and meeting at parks and just hanging out with people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you built that out of, a project that you were going to have to do anyway. And then it actually turned more into a passion project, right? Which is what I tell people a lot is like, build your business, but also have those passion projects that you love to do, that makes things fun. So let's talk a little bit about like some of your experience and some of the bigger clients that you've had the privilege to work with. How hard is it to land those big clients like that? Obviously you've worked with Shark Tank people and you've worked with, MBA clients and stuff. Were those mainly through referrals, or how did you get those gigs with some of those bigger clients?
Every single one was a relationship. I've never spent a dollar on advertising. So we do all of our revenue has grown prior to the last 2 years entirely on referrals. And then in the last 2 years, maybe another part of the conversation we can have a little bit later is about social proof. And so in the last 2 years, just helping people online has kept me and my team at the top of people's mind and establishes relationships and trust with them. And so that's outpaced referrals in the last 2 years. But the bigger the client, the more likely it was through a personal relationship. So I can actually give you an example. Like when we were working with the Utah Jazz, their retail division is called Team Store. And so the goal was to sell more jerseys and hats and merchandise. And so I'll share a story that will underscore the importance of relationships and what I was briefly touching on in social proof. And so what happened, the way that we started working with them is I made a post on LinkedIn about whatever. And so when I post about business, family, SEO, whatever it is, I never do the clickbaity stuff. I never send people to a landing page. I don't have a funnel. I don't send them to an opt-in. It's always just, here's the problem, here's the solution. And what that does is it establishes credibility with your audience because you gave them something without asking for anything in return. And then if you're consistent with it, then you stay top of mind and you get imprinted as the expert in your industry for that audience. So I made a post, a gentleman reached out and said, hey, we're looking for SEO. Most of my clients aren't local, but these guys happen to be local, about 20 minutes away. And so we set up a meeting. I went and met with them in person. And when I go to talk to a lead, I don't sell them, I educate them. And what happened is when I left that meeting, the gentleman followed up and said, it's not too often that you leave a marketing meeting not more confused, but you came in and not only told us what you can, the advantages of working with you and doing SEO, but you also told us the disadvantages of SEO, that it's slow and it takes time and all these other things. And so when you educate your audience, you establish further trust with them. And then for me, it's also an opportunity to disqualify bad leads, because I don't want to go into a client relationship where I have to always fight to prove the concept of what the service is that we're going to provide for them. So these guys end up proceeding and becoming a client. And then after about 2 weeks, SEO is like a long-term thing, right? It takes months, if not years, to get into your return and really understand the scope of the value. So we were only 2 weeks into this, and he was already impressed with not necessarily the results because we weren't that far into the journey yet, but just the ability for us to clearly communicate what we were doing and setting expectations and ownership in the product that we offered. And so that established a level of confidence and trust where he referred another business. And so he said, I'd like to introduce you to one of my friends who's over this big law firm in Las Vegas. And so I end up talking to this gentleman, same kind of thing, referral becomes a lead. And this guy, within just 1 week, same thing, he felt confident in expectations we were setting. And he said, I'd like to introduce you to the Utah Jazz. And so here we are within just 3 weeks of one post. Now we have 2 done deals and a third lead. And so with the Jazz, who this gentleman ended up being, he was the exiting vice president of their retail sales. And so the retail division of the Jazz was going through a restructuring and a rebranding. And so part of this gentleman's responsibility was to fill roles in the marketing needs. And so one of those was SEO. And so he makes the introduction, we end up proceeding and doing business with the Jazz. And so what that story emphasizes is the value in clearly communicating what your product is, being transparent with your services and setting expectations, and then just the importance of treating people like humans and establishing relationships with them.
Yeah, and I love that. And especially in the marketing world, like a lot of people just try and cram it down your throats, or they have the clickbaity headlines, and especially in like the ClickFunnels culture and a lot of that, like it's all more of the clickbaity style stuff versus actually, you need to provide the value first and, give them something. And I love that you said that you educate them, because a lot of people, especially like a lot of us, like myself, do lead gen, right? That's mainly my primarily focus. And a lot of people they don't realize how valuable those leads are, or there's misconceptions of like the whole lead gen experience in general of like, oh, they're bad leads or this and that. And then nobody follows up. So, I mean, how, as far as that goes, I know that you said that you provide a solution, like the problem and then the solution in the post to make yourself credible, and you do it consistently over time. Now, how are you going about that? Are you just finding like a little missing piece in the marketplace and then just posting about that, or maybe it's from previous experience to do that?
Most of my content is a combination of a few things. So where I get the most exposure is LinkedIn. But what's interesting though is I'll get the bigger visibility on LinkedIn, but then people will follow me over to Facebook and will often convert on Facebook. So on LinkedIn, I post about 80% business, 20%, family and personal kind of things, just to have some of that realistic connection of being a human. On Facebook, it's probably 50-50, half business, half personal kind of stuff. And so what usually when I post is primarily either like results, if I'm auditing a client's website or seeing where they're at in their campaign, and I see something that's cool, like, hey, a good example is just the other day I made a post about a new client who's only 3 months into their SEO campaign, and as we touched on, SEO usually takes a year or longer, and so they're already up. I think they were up like 79% or something like that, crazy in 3 months. And so anytime there's an opportunity to show tangible growth, then I'll do that. I'll show screenshots that show the before and after, and none of that like mystical fuzzy crap where it's like, here's a vague post, and I'll try to provide visible evidence. And then if it's not that, then what I'll often post about is when I get messages and say, hey, I got this thing. Or a lot of times I audit people's websites for free to establish a relationship. So if somebody asks me a question, then I go, let me find out. And then I'll audit their website. And then through the discovery phase of looking into other people's business models, then there's usually a common thing where I go, okay, like, this is obvious to me. It's clearly not obvious to them. So it's probably not obvious to other people too. And so I'll turn that into a post. Or like you had mentioned that I write for Forbes. And so a lot of the stuff that I write for Forbes is recurring questions. And so then this will answer your question, but this is also a good marketing tip for establishing credibility, is if you have the opportunity to write for a publication, then use that as your FAQs. Like if you go look at all the stuff that I write on Forbes, it's now almost entirely questions where I can go, when I'm in a conversation with a lead, where I can go, great question, I wrote about it over here on Forbes.
Right.
So I try to focus on that type of angle where I can actually help people, because I get so far. I've been in this for, since 2007. And then my background was before that. So I've been in this for forever. And so a lot of this stuff is common sense to me. And I get blind to that. And so I always try to look at the engagements and the questions that people send me. And then that way it's a great piece to help a greater audience. And then it's easy content for me because it's like stuff that you can do in your sleep. So look to what types of questions and feedbacks and common engagement things that you're getting from your audience, or even if you're new, like go look at what people are asking and engaging on other people that are a little further ahead of you, and use that for a topic.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you use, press as as social proof, right? Because a lot of people don't realize how powerful that is. Like I've been probably in 15 to 20 articles myself, and I utilize that all the time. Like in every presentation that I go through, I throw that out there, right? And so now granted, I'm not a contributor, which probably I should be, and that would probably help out a lot more too. But I love that you're utilizing these different social proofs and moving people from LinkedIn, which is primarily a business place, over to your personal life. I think that that's a really good strategy as far as that. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about managing a remote team, because I know that you have, I believe, 33 employees now, or maybe more. I don't know. You might have hired some more since the last time I talked. But managing a remote team, mainly they're in the Philippines, correct? or are they split?
They're split. Yeah, about half of them are in the States and half are in the Philippines.
Okay. So how do you go about managing that many people remotely? And like, how do you keep them on the same page? And what is your criteria? And like, how do you align them with your mission, your core values, your vision, all that good stuff, remotely?
So as far as scaling and managing the team, that boils down to documentation. Like your team is going to be as good or as bad as the documentation you can provide them. So years ago, I mean, it's probably about 10 years ago at this point, I documented all of our processes, painfully detailed. I mean, it took 2 or 3 hours every other day for a year, because in my business model of SEO, you can have a million different avenues. You can have an e-commerce client or a service-based client. They can be on WordPress. They can be on Shopify. Like there's all these, they can have 5 SKUs. They can have 5,000 SKUs. And so documentation took a long time for me because I had to take into consideration all those variables, because I wanted to document things as detailed as possible. So I never had to do it again, like other than updating processes over time. I didn't want like half-assed documentation and then get it somewhat usable, but then basically have to redo the whole thing because I knew I sped through it. So I took a ton of time documenting just the most granular details, because what happens is human nature is like, if there's a gap in your processes, it's going to get exposed. It might not be, it probably will not be intentional, but we're just like the whole water metaphor, like path of least resistance, right? And so if there's not something that, and it's usually the smaller, more obvious things that screw up and cause the bigger problems. So for especially the listeners who are experts at something, you will likely skip something in documentation because it's second nature to you. Don't do that. You have to take a step back and go, what is the most dumb, simplistic, like way that I can document this? And then that gives you the freedom of scalability while ensuring quality control. So you can't scale any business, but especially a remote team, without really granular documentation. Now, as far as company culture, for me, I just live it. Like the idea of a company motto and a mission statement, all that stuff is kind of cliche for me. Like we don't have any of that, but I would put my team's loyalty up against anybody else's. And to make that more of an interesting statement is, out of the 33 employees, I've only met 6 of them in person. And those 6 I only met last year. And prior to that 6, I had never met any of them. And of those 6, some of them have been working with me my longest employee has been with me for 12 years. And I had never met him until a year ago. And so what you have to do is, it's back to the comment earlier about appreciating human relationships. So when I talk to my team, the majority of the time it's I don't want to say not about business. I don't want to micromanage. That's the last thing I want to do. And so that goes back to the documentation thing. So once I give them access to our project management system, they can just run, and I'm confident they're going to produce results. But other than them pinging me with questions like, hey, I just need you to confirm something, beyond that, most of the conversation is like personal. And it's like, hey, how is your wife doing? Or, how your kid was sick and things like that. Or, the team that's in the Philippines, they don't have a lot of modern conveniences that we take for granted. And so like, I'll ask them, can I, especially during COVID, like COVID has been a real opportunity to reinforce our relationship. And so when I follow up with them on their mental stability and things like that, I'm like, what can I do for you, like outside of work? And what that translated to for a lot of them was, buy me an air conditioner, because it's hot as shit over here and we don't have those.
Right.
And I just need a new lounge chair for my wife, and while she's taking care of our new baby. And so it's just like these little things where you show an actual intent to care. And you can't send them a message or call them and be like, hey, how's your wife going? By the way, what's the status on that project? Like it needs to be a sincere effort to actually care about them beyond the scope of work. And it's super simple. You do that and everything else just takes care of itself.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with that. Actually giving a shit about your team, right? Because like one of my team members' fathers passed away, and I gave her a week off with pay,
Yeah.
and so like giving them that time to grieve and stuff like that. If you actually care about your team, you're going to grow them, grow it and scale it. And like you were talking about, is they're going to be loyal to you because they remember what you've done for them, right? And so like, being able to give back to them, I mean, granted, over there's a lot of differences. Like you were saying, they might not have an air conditioning, right? And it's hot as hell over there. So being able to provide that stability and provide those things that we take for granted for them, it definitely does build their loyalty. And they, people, especially in the Philippines and also South America, they are 100% way more loyal, at least from what I've seen, than American team members. I mean, still American team members are still loyal, but they don't, I don't want to say that, but I feel that they don't appreciate it as much. So
it's probably the similar. I mean, people are going to be loyal regardless of where they're located or their background. So maybe people in overseas country identify the opportunity to be the long-term opportunity a little bit more, because like we have a lot of opportunities in America that other people don't have, and so maybe it's a little bit being taken for granted. But yeah, I mean, you helping with the team member whose family passed away, things like that, giving it the same thing. I had somebody whose mother had a heart attack, and so I just paid for their time. They said, I'm going to be gone for a couple of days, and I said, that's fine, I'll still pay you. Or I had a new team member. This was just about a month ago. This is pretty recently. Had a new team member first week, maybe their third day, and they had something going on with their parents where they were in the hospital, and they couldn't afford the intensive care, the deposit to however it works over there. And so this person was only 3 days into working with us, and I advanced him 2 months salary to pay for it. And so those are types of things that, like, if you can show that commitment to them on a personal level, then they'll do anything in return for you. And out of my remote team, so my longest employee has been with me for 12 years. So that would mean he's my first employee, because first year or two I was just solopreneur. But I tell you that because I've never had an employee quit. And that's just like another peace of mind that I don't even speaking of taking things for granted, I totally take that for granted. Like, I don't ever think about employee turnover or anything like that. So if that ever happens, like it'll be a new emotion for me. But yeah, I mean, it is advantageous for you as a business owner and entrepreneur to care about your team way past just looking at them as like a decimal point.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of things too is like the actual titles that you give them. So instead of saying BAs or ISAs or something, giving them like executive assistant titles, like titles that make them feel, appreciated, and it doesn't devalue them. Right. So I know that that's been talked about a lot with me and several other people that have virtual teams, is like restructuring the actual labels that you're putting on the team members and making it like more of a higher tiered type position as far as like the title goes. Yeah. So, I mean, that's awesome. Do you now, as far as managing them, do you have like managers in place or like operations people that are handling the day to day on that, or are they mainly all reporting to you? Or
it's been something new that we've been transitioning actually pretty recently, because you joked maybe I've hired more people recently, because for the listeners, the reason why I made that comment is because Jacob and I just met recently, and about 6 months ago I had 16, 17 employees, and then about 4 months ago I was at 20. And then 3 months ago, I went from 20 to 30 in 1 month. And then about a week after that, I hired 3 more. So we've doubled in the last 6 months. And as far as managing them, it's like a new growing pain. It's something that's new for me, because historically, because of the documentation, I could just introduce them to the team and just let them do their thing. And as they had questions, they'd message it. We largely communicate through Skype. And but yeah, I mean, there's only so much Damon to go around. So that's been an interesting kind of thing lately where I've been the more tenured people on my team that understand all the intricacies of kind of the area of responsibilities that they're over. I've been basically promoting them to be like managers and have micro teams within our team, because then I can communicate with them. And it's an interesting evolution in business ownership, because I take a lot of pride in the personal relationships that I have with each of my team members. So having to intentionally let go of some of that, not because I want to, but it's just not physically possible anymore to allocate me as a person to that many people. So yeah, it's something that we're kind of going through right now and figuring out. I don't necessarily have an answer for it, but I think the short answer is yes.
Yeah. Now with that, like the hardest part, or what's been the biggest like pitfall for you as far as like in business and with this new and scaling? And I mean, you basically doubled the company size in the last 6 months. So I mean, what's been like the biggest pitfall, or what problems do you foresee, happening?
I I wouldn't say we've had a pitfall, but I'd say a bottleneck. I've been always fortunate to play the long term game, and so I've always kind of looking towards how to proactively buffer things, and so we've never really had any negative impacts, but I think we've had delayed opportunities. Like right now, even though my team does 95% of production, that last 5% of stuff I either start or quality control at the end. And so I'm bottlenecking some of our opportunities to roll out new processes. And, we've never done, like one example is we've never done lead gen for ourselves. And I've always been okay growing the company from phase to phase. And I've never been in a rush to be $1 billion company. Right. So when I was first self-employed for the first year or two, it was like, sweet, I can pay my bills. And I'm like 25 and I can drink a beer at 8:00 in the morning. Like, this is awesome. And so then a year later, it's like, okay, I can identify the opportunity that I have here. Let's do something with it. So you hire your first team member and then you hit 6 figures for the first time. And then that's exciting. And so then you stay at that benchmark for a while. And then it's like, okay, now let's grow the team. And now let's aim for $600,000 a year. And then you get to that point, and then that's cool for a while. And then you slowly inch up to 700,000, 800,000. And then it's like, okay, let's do $1 million a year. And then let's do 100 grand in a month. Let's do 100 grand in 2 weeks. And so I've been okay slowly growing through those processes over the years, but now you reach a certain point of success where you're comfortable taking on more aggressive risks and you want to pursue bigger goals. So now it's like, go for the moon. Like now let's go as big as we can get. And so back to coming full circle back to your question about, what's the biggest issues is I am the bottleneck of that next level because we've done so good at all the things we've done so far. And I've been the hub of all that. And now I need to get out of my own way. There is no possible way to scale further now than just getting out of the way. And so that's like, I'm okay with that. But the part that's tricky for me is like, how do I get out of my way while still protecting the things that I want to protect within the company culture and maintain those personal relationships? So that's probably the growing pains that we're at right now. And that's the biggest thing that I'm in the middle of tackling right now.
Yeah. Well, and I would give you 2 books to read. I don't know if you're a reader, but Rocket Fuel and then also Clockwork. Those are 2 really good ones. One talks about automating everything and removing yourself from the role. And then the other one talks about being the visionary versus the integrator and finding that integrator that can actually take your role and run with it and operate the company with you not being there. Because us as CEOs and founders, like I'm 100% a visionary and I'm still looking for a good integrator. So anybody listening that thinks that you're a good integrator, in the DMs. But finding someone that is good at operations. Obviously, I dealt with some of the same pains that you did, right? Documenting, and I'm actually redoing a lot of my SOPs more granular because I just kind of, like you said, like half-assed did some of them, and then now I'm having to go back and redo a lot of them, because you're right. Whenever you do become an expert at something and you are really good, you miss those small little details, and it hinders your growing, because now that you're at that level that you're at and you're trying to remove yourself, like for me, I have to go back and redo all this work that I've already done before I can remove myself from that role. Right. And so setting yourself up so that for everybody who's listening, that's maybe just starting out or, whatever, start off with the end in mind. That's something that the past 3 masterminds that I went to was talking about. Know your exit strategy, right? Know your end goal. Like, where are you going with this thing? Or are you just kind of flowing in the waves, right? You're just being in the wind, blowing back and forth. So knowing where you're wanting to go with this thing. I don't know your end goal. My end goal is $8.3 billion and give half away to charity. That's my end goal by the age of 65. But having something that's so big that you can relay that to your team and you're actually trying to make a difference. Like for me, I want to help with homelessness, with cystic fibrosis, with juvenile diabetes. Like I have all these goals and all these things that I want to help people out with. But going back to, you have to build a culture and you have to build a team and you have to have that revenue, because without the money, you're not able to make as big of an impact, right? Financially. So if you have a lot of revenue, you have a good company culture, and you have that will run without you, then you're able to focus your time on more of the visionary task, whether that's scaling the company to the next level, whether that's going on a mission to Africa and building wells, or, whatever you want to do with your time. And I think a lot of people that start a business or they start a company, they just build it into a job and they get bottlenecked, where that they're the sole person that my mom is super guilty of this. Like she's built, like everything is built around her and her business. Like she does really, really well, but everybody wants to see her, right? She's an accountant. She's got like 3,000 clients and they all want to see her. Right. And so, once you do that, you have to make sure, like, the relationships are super important, but you also have to be able to remove yourself and separate that to where they don't want to come see you. Because like my mom, everybody wants to see her. They want to talk to the tax lady, versus having those key players around you, like the C-suite executives, that can take some of that load off of your plate. Like you said, there's only so much Damon to go around, and I'm feeling the same pains too, right? There's only so much Jacob to go around. I can only talk to so many of my employees and clients and stuff like that, so it's definitely an issue.
What you can do, like in your mom's situation, it's pretty common, especially for newer businesses, to have like the founder be that central hub. But the way that you get around from cornering yourself is you evangelize your team. And so whether you're doing social proof or email marketing, or even in the one-on-one engagements, where you have to make it publicly known that you have a team, and then that helps build the confidence and trust in your clients. So like when I make posts on LinkedIn, more often than not, instead of saying, look at this 75% increase that I drove the client, it's not that. It's look at the 75% increase that my team drove for this client. And so by doing that, it helps, it frees up, gives you the freedom to include your team in the growth. And so that way you can still control what you want to control, but also bow out wherever you want to bow out.
Yeah, 100%. And that's something that we've restructured a lot in our company culture. Is everything is team driven. It's a we thing. It's not an I thing. And, just making sure that everybody knows, like, we're a team here, like everybody's working towards the same goal, and just making sure that everybody has that same end goal in mind, whether they get a piece of equity at the end, or, some portion at the exit, like let them know like this is what you guys are working towards. And I think that's a big thing, especially in newer businesses. Even if you're just starting and you don't have an employee, or maybe you're about to hire your first, like let them know that you're gonna, like, you want them to be there forever, kind of like your first employee, for 12 years. I mean, that's a long time, to have an employee with you. Now, what do you attribute that longevity to? Would it be mainly the personal relationship that you have with them, or is it they're a key player, they're just a performer, or what would you attribute that to?
This person is a designer, so they're not like in management or executive decision role or anything. So it's not necessarily that they're like a key player. It's definitely more on the personal side. It's probably a combination of a lot of small things. One is that I care,
Okay.
and there's certain things that you can't buy. Like I compensate them well. Could they get paid more? Maybe.
Yeah.
But they're not going to find another working relationship where they have as much emotional support. And then the other thing is I don't micromanage. I give them creative control within the scope of the documentation. And then I don't care when they work. Like the work gets done or it doesn't. I mean, every role that I hire for the most part, I've been a designer, I've done copywriting, I've done development. And so I can very easily pick up if production's falling behind.
Right.
And so I don't have to micromanage. I don't have to babysit. And them having ownership in their own product creates a lot of pride. And then it also probably eliminates, undue stress that exists in other working relationships that doesn't happen here. So like, I don't care if they work, James is my data analyst, and James, he works Tuesday through Sunday. Right. And Tuesday through Saturday. He wants Sundays and Mondays off. Just fine with me. Some of the teams, like some of the overseas teams, they want to work on US hours. The other want to work on Filipino hours. I don't care. And so there's a lot of flexibility and trust. I think trust. I mean, just the concept of them feeling like they're trusted empowers them, and then gives them, stability and a unique opportunity that they probably appreciate, that they realize they can't get in a lot of other places.
Yeah. Now speaking on that and having a remote team, do you have fail safes in place? Like, are you tracking their time, certain ways? Do you have like screenshot monitor, or do you just solely rely on trust? If they get the job done, they get it done? Or
totally trust. Yeah. And I can tell you a couple reasons why. One is, if I don't trust them, I don't want to be working with me anyway. Right. So even if I didn't trust them, and then I put in like time monitors and stuff like that, like that's just not a healthy relationship. And that creates stress for me. Right. But in the past, we had, at one of our points when we were scaling, I think it was probably when we went from 5 to 10 employees. We looked into time tracking software and things like that. And I had brought in kind of a person to help with some balanced team logistics. And I said, you tell me what things do we want to consider? And one of those things they proposed was like a time tracker. And I don't remember, we tried all the freaking solutions there were. And some of them, they would just log in and click a start button and then a log out button. Others would do like, when they were clocked in, it would take random screenshots of their of whatever they're working on throughout the day, so you could spot check that they weren't dinking around on Facebook. That sucked. I hated every moment of using those things. One is it felt intrusive, and I didn't feel comfortable. It also felt like I was setting my team up for them to feel like I didn't trust them. And even if it did work, or even if none of that existed, the main reason why I scrapped all of them was because I spent more time fixing the stupid ass clock in and clock out times than those clock in, clock out times saved me. Because what would happen is they'd clock in and forget to clock out, or vice versa. And so I'd have to fix like a 36-hour login and turn it back down to 18 hours, or they forgot to log in on Tuesday. I was spending more time fixing the time trackers than the time trackers were saving me time.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely understand that for sure. I've had some of those issues. I mean, it works out for me, but yeah, I definitely understand the issues on that. Now I do want to talk about like forward goals and like where you're going. What do you see in your industry, in your business, as far as like the next 3 to 5 years? Like, where do you want to be and where do you see the industry at?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think as on the industry side, there'll obviously continue to be evolutions in technologies that influence search engine marketing, but I don't think the concepts as a whole will change too dramatically. And the reason why is, as algorithms evolve, it's still the same core concepts, and that's good content, good user experience, good credibility. And so to give some direct examples, is a couple of years ago when Google made a big shift towards mobile friendly algorithms. Like if you think about that shift, all Google was saying is make sure your website loads quickly and in an intuitive design on a mobile device. Well, that's just good user experience, good design, same thing. And it's the same thing with like right now, voice is a big push, but nobody's recording voice commands and cues on the backside of websites. What's happening is Google saying, okay, we just got a voice response, but go do the normal stuff to find the answer. And what that normal stuff is find the website that we trust that has good content that we can return the answer quickly. It's still just common SEO practices of good design, good user experience, good credibility. So there'll probably be an evolution in what factors influence those core principles, but I think the core principles will, for the most part, stay the same. Now, as far as what my company vision in the next 3 to 5 years, candidly, I don't know. It's like one of those things I'm trying to figure out right now. Is it, do I continue to ride the gravy train,
Right,
or do I exit, or I have no reason to exit, but I'd also like to focus on helping more people. And so, but where I'm already running short on Damon time, then that means I have to get myself entirely out of production. So I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of opportunities and all of them are good. I think as of now, I'm leaning more towards replacing myself, keeping the business and continuing to scale it. Because when I go in and I do things like this, like podcasts and webinars and the social proof thing, that's the part that I enjoy, is helping people and establishing relationships and meeting new people and playing the long-term game. But it also feeds leads as a bonus into the business. So for me, it makes sense. Like that's where I get my personal rewards, but it also contributes to the growth of the company. So as of now, that's where I'm leaning.
Yeah, 100%. That's a good vision for the next couple of years. Now, what's one big piece of advice that maybe someone's starting out, or maybe they're in the middle of their business? What's one of your best tips for someone in business, as far as just like general tips that you would give?
What comes to mind is to just start. Like, don't overthink it. You can have the most perfect business plan, and as soon as you start, it's going to get shit on. And so you're going to learn more by just doing than planning. So I would say, it's like business is like having a kid. Like there's, people say there's no perfect time to have a kid. It's like the same thing. There's no perfect time to start a business or do this next phase in business. So if you're really thinking about doing whatever that is, then just do it and figure, and then that's going to tell you way more quicker if it's worth pursuing or not. And then I kind of along that same lines is, once you start, don't stop until, I'm not saying, I'm okay if it makes sense to stop, but give it enough time for you to make an educated decision if it is right to continue or stop. And then kind of somewhere in the middle is like I touched on earlier. I think a big part that's contributed to my success is giving myself the freedom to date those options, right? And figure out where you're comfortable and what you like and what you don't like. So don't fit, while I do agree with what you were saying about figure out a long-term plan, I think there's like a middle ground where you should give yourself the freedom to screw up and figure things out and decide if this is something you want to commit to. Then once you realize you found the thing that you want to marry and commit to long term, then yes, figure out the long-term vision and then pursue how to get from A to Z. But until you get that level of confidence that your thing is what you want to be in for the long term, be okay saying no, and be okay pivoting, be okay restarting, be okay like chucking it all the way out the window. I think the only thing worse than like committing to something and then like being successful with it is like, I think there's a lot to be said about regret. Like, I would way rather quit something, start something new, be a step behind, but be happy and still figuring it out, than committing to, I got like one of my wife's nieces is a good example. She's going to nursing school, and now she's second guessing it now that she's in it. And she's realizing that that's not what she wants to do long term, either personally or for whatever her reasons may be. Now she's starting to feel pressure from like her family, or like, and then in her own mind, like, I wasted a year going through school so far. But what's worse, like finishing it and then hating life? Yeah. So like, give yourself the freedom to really commit to something that you can commit to.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Definitely getting started and just not giving up, because most people, it's kind of like my sign back here says 97% people who quit, they're employed by the top 3% that don't, right? So always giving yourself enough leeway to at least potentially be successful. Now, I know we're coming close to the end of our time. I wanted to talk about one more topic, and then we'll finish up. Work-life balance and relationships. How has that been for you, scaling your company to 7 figures, and what does that look like? Because I know that you've been with your wife for 15 years. How do you guys balance that as far as like do you guys set boundaries, or like what does that look like for you guys?
So I have hard lines that I draw between like work and personal life. This is one of the articles that I wrote for Forbes is a perfect example of your immediate question, but then also I just fired a client yesterday, and then I pointed him to the Forbes article. And so here's kind of like this perfect storm of a lot of answers. So, I do a lot of things to protect my family time. So I don't give clients my cell phone number. I never have. I don't have Messenger on my phone, so I'm not distracted by that. I don't have email on my phone. I only check emails once or twice a day, and it's only when I'm on my laptop. And even when I'm on my laptop, I don't have automatic send and receive enabled. So the only time I get emails is when I manually push the button and I'm ready to take on that mental commitment of 100 emails for the day. And so I have like really hard lines that I've made that are intended to protect the family, but it's also protects work too, because like if a client's blowing me up at 11 o'clock at night, I'm going to hate that client. And and then if I hate that client, then I'm going to be more likely to drop the ball on some part of fulfillment that we're doing for that client. And so it's intended to protect both sides of that work-life balance. But the example of just firing a client literally yesterday, is there was a client that reached out about 2 weeks ago, real successful business. He had some other SEOs mess up his site. He's been trying to find somebody for like 6 months, a year that understands the detail, the intricacies of what they changed and why, and how to undo it. And so I was able to help him in just like 10 days. And so, but before we engaged, I said, look, here's our commitment. Like we're not available after 5. Like our auto attendants shut off at 5. You cannot get through to us after 5. And we're not around on weekends. You're not getting my cell phone number. And then not only did I verbalize that, but it's in the contract. And I wish I could show you on screen our contract. Like we had a section that said like, in reasonably large letters, that's like, family time is important, and all the things I just talked about availability. About 2 weeks ago, I changed it. It takes up a whole fucking page now. And the words literally say, we made this big for a reason. Read it. And then after that, it says all the family things that I talked about. And it says like, we love you, but we love our family too. And like, here's our availability. So this gentleman knew all these things, and I could still tell that he was like a little persistent in some of the ways he was engaging in emails and trying to gently nudge me to expedite things beyond the scope of what I committed to. And so I just emailed him that Forbes article, and I said, I wrote about this on Forbes. Here it is. And what happened is we had everything done. I gave him like a 3-week commitment. We got everything knocked out in about 2 weeks. There was one last thing that I wanted to do. It wasn't even part of our original engagement. It was just something that while I'm in there, it was an opportunity for me. I saw this other thing that would help him out. And so I said, hey, we're going to make this one more change. It'll be after the weekend. Now, as of the time that you and I are recording this, it's right after the 4th of July weekend. And so he emailed me on the 3rd of July, which is a Saturday, which I'm not getting because it's on a weekend and I'm not checking my emails. Monday, I only check my emails once or twice a day, which he knows. And midday Monday, I get an email that he said, man, it really kills me that it takes you guys a couple days to make these updates. So right then I finished his update. I wrote him back and I said, thanks a lot for the opportunity to work with you. I'm going to wrap up this invoice and, we're not going to engage any further. I don't remember the exact words I used, but I was very polite about it, but I said, look, family time is not negotiable. You emailed on a weekend, any weekend period, but let alone a holiday weekend.
Right.
And, this guy, I'm interested to see his reply. But this guy he's a big networker. He has a lot of opportunities to connect us with other businesses. I don't care. There's not a dollar amount that's worth it to me to sacrifice my sanity. So I make pretty hard lines and they're really simple things. I mean,
yeah,
nothing that I talked about is mind blowing, but as long as you communicate that to your clients, it's not weird. It's only going to be weird if you make it weird. So as long as you proactively communicate those availabilities, it's no big deal.
Yeah. Well, and I love that, setting hard lines and hard limits to where you're not, there's non-negotiables with family time. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about regrets, right? Like not having any type of regrets, and so I love that. So one last thing, if today was your last day, Damon, what would you want to be known for?
I think I'm already there. I think, just somebody that actually has a sincere interest in helping other people. So, I've been very strategic about what I've tried to accomplish in life. I think there's a lot more that I can do to amplify what I would in theory be known for, but I'm happy where I'm at.
Awesome. Now, how do people get a hold of you, Damon? Obviously you don't have a cell phone, right?
Yeah, not my cell phone. I'm most active on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can just search my name. I'll pop right up. And anybody that's interested on the business side of things, SEO, or learning more about the value in relationships, you can go to freeseobook.com. I have a copy of my 135-page SEO book that's on there. It's all our practices. It's exactly what we do. There's no upsell or anything. A thank you page invites to our Facebook group. That's it. But in there's also a chapter that's called Be Human, and it talks a lot about what we've talked about today, where I actually have screenshots where I quantify like this post translated into this $10,000 a month retainer. And so there's a lot of inspiring but tangible real life evidence stories that are in there that are just like feel good stories, but also underscore the importance of relationships and scaling a business.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Whiskey with Winners podcast, Damon. I'll get this published and look forward to talking with you next time.
Yeah, thanks for chatting, Jacob.
Thank you for listening to the Whiskey with Winners podcast, your home for real and raw stories of industry titans. Make sure to click the button below to subscribe. Follow our journey on Instagram at Most Interesting Marketer and Anchor, Stitcher, YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Remember to always stay humble, stay hungry, and stay focused.
Everything that I'm saying is out of context. Wait, it's not even really a contest. See, if you already know, then I'm next. Looking at a bodybuilder like Y-Flex. I'm dope in the pot like it's Pyrex. And I do it big just like a T-Rex. A T-Rex, I'm the best to ever do it. Could be so dope when he flow to the fucking music. Like, this shit is nasty for real. Yeah, I'm dope. You don't even have to ask me for real, man. Damn, I think I'm going wrong. I'm going hard. Woo. Who could come up with the bars? I'm a shooting star. I shine bright in the fucking night, and they can tell me that I'm doing wrong. I do it right, like I'm at the top. So who could really top that? Yeah, and tune in to the podcast.